Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. This is such a tremendous honor to have the filmmaker here with Cave of Forgotten Dreams. We've had him here a couple times before, but this is a special treat because Cave of Forgotten Dreams has already become our biggest film ever, and to have him here in the middle of the run with a full house on a Sunday night is a wonderful thing. Please welcome Werner Herzog.
Thank you very much for coming. I had the opportunity to be in New York because tomorrow night I'll be on the Colbert show. Whatever that means. I heard it was funny and I'm supposed to be funny, but I have no idea. So, actually, I'm just in the middle of work. I'm doing 5 films at the moment on death row. And the main film, a 1.5-hour film, will hopefully play here could play probably from September on. But I have to do four other films, and I've actually made a film on the musicians, on Ernst Reisiger, who composed and played the music, so I'm doing 5-6 films this year. Well, I've come for your questions. Please feel free to,
Yes, right here. Go ahead.
We're so surrounded.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
It seems like we're so surrounded by media now, but filmmaking technology in your career has become more and more ephemeral. It's digits now. Making this film, did you ponder what will be contemporarily for people 28,000 years from now?
I do not fully understand the question, but...
What do you think we're making now that might persist 28,000 years from now?
Well, that's a good question. Probably not cinema because it needs technology and we may lose technology fairly soon. That's the first thing that's going to go because I think the human race is not sustainable as it is right now. And highly technological civilizations are even more vulnerable because you can repair your bicycle yourself, or somebody can do that who is mechanically good, but you cannot repair your computer. And just imagine a blackout in the United States for 2 weeks, a blackout, no electricity. You wouldn't have any communications, you can't pump gas because it's all electricity driven, you can't enter into a supermarket because the doors would not open and the cash register wouldn't register anything. So it would be unspeakable chaos and unspeakable disaster if we had 2 weeks without electricity. And this may very easily happen. So I do believe that more solid things, more primitive, and I really mean now primitive things like a person with a chisel and a rock in front of him and a hammer, and you will create some sort of a sculpture. Probably has much more endurance. And by the way, books have much more endurance than films. So do not underestimate the value of books. But I do not really know. Maybe in 20,000, 28,000 years from now, we are not going to be here anymore. It doesn't look very likely. By the way, it doesn't make me very nervous either. But I think we'll have the same basic quests for figurative representation, for song, for dance, for storytelling. Storytelling is not going to go away. It's probably the last that will go away because you do not need any instruments for it. It's just experience. And it's just an art of storytelling. And this is my problem that I have with television. Because television is completely dominated by the market, by commercials. They are the ones who pay for it, for television. And a great gift of the human race, storytelling, which has existed certainly for tens of thousands of years, all of a sudden becomes fragmented. A film in this film will be shown on television, and it has to be formatted for television, which means every 9 minutes you have a block of 3 minutes of commercials, something roughly like this. So, in other words, our deeply embedded sense of storytelling has become fragmented. And I do not like this, and I do not support it. I've been offered to do commercials, and I do not do it for reasons of principle. I cannot avoid it, and I cannot change the world, but you can offer me as much money as it gets. I will not do a commercial. I do not want to be part of this culture of destruction of storytelling. So, but of course, you are thinking quite far into the future. When I try to think into the future, it's maximum 400 years or so.
Yes, right over here.
Hi, you have such a tremendous corpus of films in number, dozens and dozens and dozens.
Numbers do not count. Yeah.
Well, true, but you've almost altogether avoided eroticism and the erotic. You don't have very many sex scenes at all, really, except for one fantastic one with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. And Klaus Kinski and Isabella Gianni in Nosferatu.
I was just wondering why you haven't done that any more than you have, given the vast number of stories you've told.
Yeah, difficult to answer. I do not really know why. There's some sort of a deeply embedded sort of shyness to touch this. I rather have a sex scene as something very private. I make a clear distinction between private life and life in storytelling, life in movies. Quite often I was asked, yeah, why didn't you film anything for example, when I traveled on foot? Now traveling on foot has a different meaning. There was a different mission out there. No film ever will be made when will not be filming when I travel on foot. I will probably, I don't see that in the future I would do an erotic scene or an outright pornographic scene. Probably it's easier to do porno than an erotic scene. I wouldn't exclude it, but I have also asked myself, why is it that there are so few women in major parts in my films? It's a similar or maybe related question. I have no clear answer. Why is it that, for example, Ingmar Bergman is at his best with women? Why is it that Antonioni is always at his best with women? Why is it that a French great, wonderful filmmaker, Melville, is only good, or hardly any woman ever appears, but in this case there's an undercurrent of something homoerotic. It's very, very evident. It's kind of palpable. So that's probably the background. In my case, very hard to explain, and I do not have a full answer. Recently I thought about this, and strangely enough, the next 2 or 3 feature films all will have females as a central character in the film. I'm planning a film in the Arabian desert, which is a little bit in turmoil at the moment, about some sort of a female equivalent of Lawrence of Arabia. However, it's not financed yet, and I don't know whether it's going to be financed. But again, there will be no erotic scenes in the film, although the protagonist has 2 great love stories, both of them tragic love stories. But I don't see a real erotic scene in it. Not that I have planned for it. There's nothing in the screenplay. The lady here.
Did you dream about the cave paintings at all?
Did I dream about the cave paintings? No, I do not dream, unfortunately. I really do not dream. People do not believe me, but that's my answer against all the shrinks who claim vigorously that every person dreams so and so much time each night. No, I do not dream, period. So they're all wrong. But I do have daydreams. When I walk or so, sometimes I'm into complete novels. I see entire films. This is why it's so easy for me to a screenplay. I see an entire film and I just need to write it down. So it's as if I was copying a screenplay. I can do it in 3 days, 4 days. I've never written longer than 8 days on a screenplay because it's so alive, so vividly visible and audible. And how can I say? I wish I could dream, but I know what I'm doing here is related to dreams. It's related to fantasies. It's related to an abyss of the unknown. And to activate this abyss is probably the best through almost dreaming. So when you see the film, it should be a film, and that's in the title also, Cave of Forgotten Dreams, trying to not have a scientific approach to it, but through an almost equivalent of dreams, to discover something that is deep inside of us and which apparently was deep inside of these people 32,000 years ago. So, but unfortunately I don't dream. Yes, sometimes, very rarely, but it's banalities that I don't know, I dropped my keys. And I had a dream about 1.5 years ago, but it's so banal that I shouldn't even tell you. I dreamt that I had a sandwich for lunch.
Yes, right here.
I was just wondering, on books, I was wondering when you were doing your research for going into the cave, you found that you did literature about this or?
Research about this cave. Yes, there are 2 books out on the cave by Jean-Claude, one of the protagonists in the film, and I think the discoverers have published a book. They actually are there twice in the credits. At the end they appear again because they are the tragic figures believing that they had proprietary rights to the cave, started to sue the French state, and they have been suing the French state since 14 years, lost every single lawsuit, lost every appeal, spent all their money. It's really kind of tragic. Because of the film, and I tried very, very hard to have them in the movie, guiding us through the cave. They wouldn't do it because they didn't want to compromise their position in court, but I persuaded both the Ministry of Culture and the discoverers to name a mediator. So it will be mediated. It should have been mediated already. Hasn't been done yet, but I hope this craze will end. Otherwise, I have not gone into direct studies of the cave. There's not too much out there yet. And it will take decades of research, archaeological research, for example, until we have more convoluted and more fact-based results from science. But the strange thing is my very first awakening, intellectual, spiritual awakening, came through cave paintings. You may know that I grew up in the Bavarian mountains. I mean, really, really remote. I had no idea that cinema even existed until I was 11. And I made my first phone call when I was 17. So that gives you a little bit an idea. But my family moved to Munich, and when I was 12, maybe 13, I walked past a bookstore. In the display, among others, all of a sudden I spot I was just like froze in my tracks. I see a book on cave paintings. I had no idea that cave paintings existed, and it said Paleolithic and 12,000 years back, and there was a wonderful horse. And I wanted to buy the book, and I didn't have any money, so I had something like 50 cents per month as pocket money. And that wasn't enough to buy and to save it. It would have taken too long, so I started to work as a ball boy in tennis courts and made money. And each week I would sneak by and look if the book was still there. I hoped and prayed that nobody would buy the book. So the book, I thought apparently there was only one, and I wanted to have this book. So finally I bought the book, and when I opened it, this kind of awe, this kind of shudder of awe is still in me. And of course, over the course of time, I've read a lot about cave paintings, but of course, all the cave paintings that were discovered so far are much, much younger in date. They're only, I say only, 12, 14, maybe 15,000 years back in time. It's less than half the time distance than to Chauvet Cave. Many of these caves are closed now, shut down categorically. Lascaux, the most famous one, shut down, and it's probably the best described and best researched cave. Too many people who went in there left left a mold on the walls that is spreading, and they can't control it fully. So that was shut down. Altamira in the Spanish Pyrenees shut down, and I think a couple of others. So the greatest, most wonderful ones, Lascaux, Altamira, are shut down. And it may happen with Chauvet as well. They've been extremely cautious, but I have departed a little bit from the question about research. Very little research on Chauvet Cave from my side, but of course I kept talking every day, every evening with scientists about their findings.
Time for a couple more questions.
Maybe all the way back there, yes.
Will you plan on shooting in 3D again?
I do not think so. What I'm doing right now on death row is, of course, would be silly to do it in 3D. A big epic feature film, I do not see it in 3D either. And I think there is a problem with 3D. Not in this case. I think that's it was in a way mandatory or imperative to shoot this film in 3D, because that's probably the only film document that we'll ever have. And of course the artists utilized the drama of the formations for their paintings, the niches, the bulges. So I knew immediately, yes, it was the right decision to do it in 3D, but otherwise we do not like, in our normal lives, we do not like to see 3D all the time, full 3D. We see with one dominant eye, and that's 2D. When I look at you, I see you basically in 2D, and I vaguely, peripherally notice that there is a depth of people here in front of you. But I really, when I focus on you, I do not see fully 3D. So, of course, you cannot switch away. The brain cannot somehow be selective when you watch a 3D film. It's the same like when we are talking in a noisy sidewalk cafe. And we talk to each other and we hear exactly what we are talking, but if you record this on tape, the noises around the traffic, other voices are so bad, and you cannot filter it out. Once it's banned, once it's inscribed on a tape, or once it's inscribed on film, you cannot filter away anymore. There's a strange thing going on in our brains. So I think that's why it's okay and legitimate to have all the fireworks. The fireworks, yes, do it in 3D like Avatar. I like to see 4th of July fireworks. And I see it only once a year. And that's totally fine, and audiences apparently love it, otherwise the film wouldn't have been so successful. But at the same time, it forces us to see, how shall I explain this? When you see a firework, there's nothing beyond the firework. The effect itself is manifests itself, and there's no depth, no other layer behind it. When, for example, when you do a feature film, when you see a story, for example, a love story, erotic, a romantic comedy. Let's say you see a romantic comedy. We as an audience immediately start to develop our separate, parallel, independent, different story. We start to hope and pray, please let these young lovers find each other beyond all the obstacles. There's always a second, a parallel, different reality going on in an audience. That's the beauty of real storytelling. But if you do a 3D romantic comedy, you will be shut out from this second parallel stories that you start to develop. I think, and I have a dictum, you can do a porno in 3D, but not a romantic comedy. The porno, the act of fornication has no parallel story. It is just the act, period. However, a romantic comedy has us as participants in a separate reality, in our own emotions, in our own hearts, in our own fantasies. We create a separate story, parallel. And this is always, it has always struck me, real storytelling has to do with audiences. It has to do with audiences. And as a storyteller, you have to understand how to create the parallel story within your hearts, but in the collective hearts. That's a very, very strange thing, and this is why I love cinema. If you see a film all alone on your plasma screen, these parallel stories do not happen. Or, for example, alone on a plasma screen, seeing a funny film, you never laugh. But when you are sitting with 150 people, you always laugh. Everybody laughs. There's something collective. And because of that, reaching audiences in cinema has always been the mother of all battles for me, from my first days as a filmmaker on.
Speaking of storytelling, do you think it's possible to make an unprecedented form of narrative?
Storytelling, whether they're unprecedented forms of storytelling are possible, yes, of course. It's all evolving, and when you look at cinema, sometimes I lose confidence and I think, oh my goodness, yeah, it's somehow settling down and nothing new is coming, and the moment you think nothing is happening, all of a sudden you have 5 films out of Iran, for example. And when you look, for example, well, new forms of storytelling, yes, they are possible, and I have done it, for example, in Fata Morgana or in quite a few films. I think you should, as a filmmaker, you should always try to find new forms of storytelling, because storytelling, as you see it in cinemas, and I'm speaking of filmmakers now, storytelling in cinema has undergone through the studio system and the enormous expenses of making films, an enormous rigor and strictures. It's almost, you have to have, a film without a happy end is unthinkable. The hero in the film has to undergo a change, and you hear it in seminars for screenplays. By page 28, he has to understand his mission. If it comes later than 28 minutes in the film, you lose your audience. He has to undergo a transformation and has to come out a different, better man. I mean, it's just grotesque. In Ageri, the Wrath of God, you have somebody who's really bad and he stays bad all the time. So, yeah, you have to be bold enough. And audiences, for example, the albino crocodiles. This is really absolutely, I take you on a wild ride into the wildest science fiction fantasy, although it is embedded in a notion of perception. How do we perceive? How did these people 32,000 years perceive? How do albino crocodiles perceive? So it's embedded in a thought, but otherwise I just go on a rampage. And audiences love to be taken seriously. I want to take you along, and of course it is not fact-based. The albino crocodiles are not even crocodiles. They're alligators from Louisiana that were bought by this facility out there. And they have nothing to do with the radioactivity or so. I actually had to change the nuclear plant threatened to sue the film because the text originally read, it said something, somehow, now I remember, warmed by radioactivity. It is not a surprise that I've turned into radioactive mutant albinos, and man do they thrive. So I had to take out, because of legal lawsuits against me, I had to take out warmed by radioactivity. I love to share it with you now, but but you see, I want to take you seriously as somebody who is imaginative, and it's always imagination. To come back to you, imagination never has full boundaries. You can do wild things, but very often my advice is give a bottom of the already known and depart from there. If you go completely and utterly from the first moment into the unknown, into new forms, that's difficult. And for example, the music at the end of the film, Ernst Reisiger, a very similar thing. He has a cello with 5 strings, a very low bass string added, and he plays overtones, 5 octaves higher in pitch, and does the craziest science fiction sort of spherical music. And I said to him, Ernst, embed it in at least some fragments of melodies. So when you listen very carefully to the music, and it will be out on CD very soon, or maybe it's already out, you always hear fragments of melodies, of something that sounds familiar to you, and all of a sudden the cello departs completely into the absolute unknown. And in a similar way, my advice to you as a filmmaker is embed something into something known, and then go wild. Go as wild as it gets. Nobody will stop you. Yes.
Well, I would love to continue.
Maybe one more question.
One more question.
Make it very brief.
I was just wondering if any of the 3 professionals found yourself emotionally overwhelmed by the cave while you were filming.
It happens, yes. Death row is something where, in particular, when I'm, how shall I say, when I'm filming, wherever I turn, I look into an abyss. It's staggering. Now, I have edited a first version of the film, but I had some gaps. Normally, I'm a steady worker, 8 hours, but here in this film, maximum 5 hours, and both the editor and I are spent. It is so intense. Both of us have started smoking. We have to walk out every hour, every 1.5 hours. We scramble out, hang on to a cigarette, and try to somehow face what we have to face in the editing. So yes, there's some very, very disturbing emotional things, but I'm a professional and I will do this, and I have to do it. I have to face my own material. Okay, I thank you very much for coming. We may show Death Row here. I don't have a solid title yet. Maybe the bigger film is A Tale of Death, A Tale of Life. But I don't know yet. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a full house waiting to come in, so if you could make your way